Welcome to the next installment of the Train Vicar. Today we are continuing the series on passenger trains in New Zealand, and we'll look at the period from 1969 to 1990. And to get a sense of what a train in the late 1960s might have looked like, I've come here to the Vicar Pass Railway in North Canterbury. In the late 1960s and throughout the 1970s, the era of the red passenger train in New Zealand was slowly coming to an end. Both for railcars and for carriage trains, the colour red was out, and with it the public transport service function of New Zealand Rail slowly ebbed away as well. Instead, New Zealand Rail now sold products. The first of these was the Blue Streak railcar, which was an articulated 88-seater railcar that was refurbished in 1968 for service between Auckland and Hamilton. It was in a striking new blue and cream livery called Blue Streak. Unfortunately, it wasn't very successful between Auckland and Hamilton, and so was switched to the Auckland to Wellington service, where it was quite successful. Two more railcars were refurbished, and from 1968 to 1972 they provided the service between Auckland and Wellington. In 1970, change came to the South Island. The steam-hauled South Island Limited was replaced by the diesel-hauled Southerner. The carriages were refurbished in a striking blue and gold and very nice interior. Inside the train there was a buffer service, and the timetable was accelerated. This service operated between Christchurch and Invercargill. In 1971, a new sleeper train between Auckland and Wellington was introduced, the Silver Star. This was really luxurious and a whole new experience in overnight travel. In 1972, the Blue Streak service between Wellington and Auckland was replaced by the Silver Fern Railcars, three purpose-built railcars built in Japan for the service along the North Island main trunk. Also in 1972, a new carriage train was introduced between Wellington and Napier. It was called the Endeavour, and it was modelled on the Southerner with blue carriages and a buffer car. But while long-distance travel was upgraded through these modern, faster services, local transport deteriorated. The last remaining railcar services were slowly cancelled as the condition of the railcars became very poor. There were efforts to buy new railcars and new carriages for regional transport, but even though Cabinet approved the purchase of them, there were never actually any orders. In 1977, the Blue Streak railcars, which had now been switched to the service between Wellington and New Plymouth, ceased, and there was no replacement rail services, so that now there was no passenger trains to New Plymouth anymore. The last Drury or Fiat railcar ran between Greymouth and Christchurch in 1978, not 1976 as I had previously stated, and it actually had to be rescued because it failed on the last service. Some of the rail cars were then refurbished as grass grubs, that is, as carriages, which were hauled by locomotives for regional services. This was just a stopgap measure. Suburban services were also curtailed. In Christchurch, the electric trains between Lyttelton and Christchurch ceased in 1970 and were operated by diesel locomotives until 1972. The suburban service to Raniora ceased in 1976. Suburban trains in Dunedin ended in 1982, services in Auckland were also decreased. Only Wellington bucked the trend, with 44 new electric multiple units introduced in 1982. These were constructed by the Hungarian firm of Guns Mavag and served in the capital for quite a long time. The premier overnight service between Wellington and Auckland, the Silver Star, ceased operation again in 1979, only 8 years after it began. In the 1970s and 1980s, New Zealand Rail focused even more on freight transport, and passenger transport was just a sideline. Apart from the premier rail services, passengers were now transported by bus through the railway's road services. In the 1980s, New Zealand Rail was restructured and now became a state-owned enterprise focused on making a profit. New Zealand Rail reorganized into several business groups. Apart from freight, the passenger groups were City Line for suburban bus services, City Rail for suburban train services, and Intercity, which combined long-distance rail, road, and ferry services. Even though there were some connections between road and rail and ferries, the emphasis was really on the road services. In that network, trains were just a premier service within the wider intercity network. In 1987, the passenger train between Christchurch and Greymouth was turned into a premier tourist service called the Transalpine, and in 1989, the service between Wellington and Napier was relaunched as the Bay Express. As the Train Vicar, I want to make a quick comparison. It seems that in the lives of many Christians, and probably also of nations in general, God has become something of an add-on or luxury on top of the life that we are really focused on. That restricts God and doesn't give us the true freedom and joy that God can give us.
In the land down under, where the winds blow free, lies a tale of railways, a turbulent history. Since 1863, they've rolled on the tracks, moving people and goods, never looking back. They built this country, connected it all, provided the lifeline for both big and small. But short-sightedness and self-interest prevail. Railways not fully developed, potential derail. Steel tracks